when did a random side quest traumatize you for life? When I got busted selling Galaxy gas in the school bathrooms last month, I thought my life was over. The judge gave me 60 hours of community service at the local elementary's after-school program instead of juvie. I had to wear this bright orange vest that basically screamed delinquent and help watch kids from 3 to 6 every day. On my first day, this mom rushed up to me looking desperate. She had dark circles under her eyes and kept checking her phone like she was late for something important. She pointed to this skinny kid sitting alone on the swings and grabbed my arm. "Please keep an eye on Kaysen," she said. "He has a really hard time making friends." I told her of course I would. What else was I supposed to say with my probation officer watching from across the playground? Kaysen was one of those kids who seemed to shrink into himself. He had these thick glasses that were always sliding down his nose and wore the same Pokemon hoodie every single day. While the other 4th graders ran around playing kickball or tag, Kaysen sat by himself reading manga or drawing in this beat-up notebook. I started sitting next to him during snack time. At first, he barely looked at me, but after a few days, he started showing me his drawings. The kid was actually really talented. He drew these elaborate dragons and warriors that looked like they could be in a real comic book. I told him they were cool, and his whole face lit up like Christmas morning. By the second week, Kaysen was following me around like a shadow. He'd help me set up the sports equipment and clean up after arts and crafts. While we worked, he'd tell me about his favorite anime shows and video games. The other kids still ignored him, but at least he wasn't completely alone anymore. One afternoon, we were putting away the kickballs when Kaysen stopped and stared across the playground. This kid named Quincy was practicing kicks against the wall. Quincy was basically a 4th grade athlete superstar. He could kick a ball clear across the field and always got picked first for every game. "You okay?" I asked Kaysen. His face turned bright red and he mumbled something I couldn't hear. Then he looked up at me with these huge eyes behind his glasses. "Can I tell you a secret?" he whispered. "Promise you won't tell anyone?" I promised, even though keeping 4th grader secrets wasn't exactly in my job description. "I think I like boys instead of girls," he said so quietly I almost missed it. "And I really like Quincy." My brain kind of froze for a second. This kid was trusting me with something huge, and I had no idea what to say. I remembered being his age and having crushes that felt like the end of the world, but this was different. This was complicated in ways I didn't know how to handle. "That's okay," I finally said. "Liking someone is never wrong." Kaysen's shoulders relaxed like he'd been holding his breath. Then he grabbed my sleeve with this desperate look. "Do you think Quincy could like me back?" I watched Quincy nail another perfect kick, and honestly, I had no idea. The kid was popular and confident, and probably had never thought about Kaysen once. But Kaysen was looking at me like I had all the answers, so I told him we'd figure it out together. Over the next few days, I turned into some kind of 4th grade detective. I'd casually bring up Kaysen when I was near Quincy to see his reaction. I watched how Quincy acted during group activities to see if he paid attention to any boys differently. Kaysen would give me these hopeful looks across the playground, and I'd give him subtle thumbs up or down. The investigation wasn't going great. Quincy seemed totally focused on kickball and Pokemon cards. He wasn't mean to Kaysen, but he didn't notice him either. Kaysen started getting more anxious as the week went on. He'd draw pictures of him and Quincy as anime characters going on adventures together, then tear them up before anyone could see. Finally, on Thursday, Kaysen marched up to me with this determined look I'd never seen before. His hands were shaking, but his chin was up. "I'm going to tell him," he announced. "Today. After kickball." I tried to talk him out of it. Quincy was surrounded by his friends all the time and rejection would be brutal. But Kaysen shook his head. "You're always so confident even though everyone knows you got arrested," he said. "I want to be brave, like you." That hit different. Here I was, a screw-up doing forced community service, and this kid thought I was brave. I couldn't bring myself to crush that. The day felt like it lasted forever. Kaysen could barely concentrate during homework time and kept looking at the clock. When the final kickball game started, he stood on the sidelines psyching himself up. I watched from across the playground, feeling like I was gonna throw up. 6 o'clock came and parents started arriving. Kaysen's mom rushed in looking frazzled as always. She signed the pickup sheet and looked around. "Where's Kaysen?" she asked. My stomach dropped. I scanned the playground but didn't see him anywhere. His backpack was gone from the cubbies. "I thought he left with you already," I said. Her face went white. We ran around checking every corner of the school grounds while calling his name. Other staff members joined the search. His mom was making panicked phone calls, and I felt like the world's biggest failure. Then I remembered Kaysen mentioning the bathroom earlier. I sprinted to the boys' room and pushed open the door. Kaysen was crumpled on the floor with blood covering his face. I dropped to my knees next to him, and my hands were shaking as I pressed my orange vest against his nose, trying to stop all the blood. "Help!" I screamed as loud as I could. "Somebody help!" His glasses were cracked and hanging off one ear, and his Pokemon hoodie was torn at the collar. Curtis Mills came running through the door first, with Jillian Schwartz, the school nurse, right behind him carrying her medical bag. "Oh my God," Curtis said when he saw all the blood on the tiles. Jillian pushed past him and knelt down next to me, pulling on latex gloves. She gently moved my vest away from Kaysen's face, and I saw the gash above his eyebrow that was still bleeding bad. Kaysen's eyes were barely open, and he made this small whimpering sound when she touched his face. Curtis, call 911 right now, Jillian said, while she pulled gauze from her bag and pressed it against the cut. Curtis fumbled with his phone, and I could hear him telling the operator we needed an ambulance at the elementary school for a hurt student. Jillian shined a little flashlight in Kaysen's eyes, checking his pupils while holding the gauze with her other hand. "Kaysen, can you hear me?" she asked, but he just made another weak sound. My whole body was shaking, and I kept telling them how I found him like this just a few minutes after he went missing, and how his mom was still out there looking for him. Curtis ran back outside to find her while Jillian kept working on Kaysen. She checked his arms and legs for other injuries and found bruises starting to form on his ribs when she lifted his hoodie. The ambulance sirens got louder and louder until they were right outside. 2 paramedics rushed in with a stretcher, and Jillian quickly told them what she found, including possible head trauma and the bleeding that wouldn't stop. They put a neck brace on him real careful and lifted him onto the stretcher. That's when Kaysen's mom came running in, and she completely lost it when she saw her son covered in blood on that stretcher. "What happened to my baby?" she kept asking over and over while tears streamed down her face. Nobody had answers for her yet. The paramedics were already wheeling him out, and she followed them crying and asking questions they couldn't answer. Curtis grabbed my arm as everyone headed for the ambulance. "Listen, your probation officer needs to know about this right away, since it happened during your shift," he said, and my stomach felt like it dropped through the floor. This could mean juvie after all, since a kid got hurt while I was supposed to be watching. We followed the ambulance to the hospital in Curtis's car, and he made the call to my probation officer on the way. I sat in the back seat, still covered in Kaysen's blood, trying not to throw up. At the hospital, they took Kaysen straight back to the emergency room, and his mom went with him while Curtis and I had to wait in the lobby. About an hour later, a doctor came out and told us Kaysen had a mild concussion and needed 6 stitches above his eye, but he was going to be okay. His mom came out a few minutes later looking exhausted. "He's awake," she said. "He told me someone hit him after he tried to talk to that Quincy boy." My heart sank because I knew exactly what Kaysen had tried to do. Curtis started asking more questions, but then my probation officer walked through the hospital doors looking serious. He pulled me aside and said he needed to know everything that happened. I told him the whole story about how Kaysen trusted me with his secret about liking boys, and how he had a crush on Quincy, and how he decided to tell him today, even though I tried to talk him out of it. The probation officer wrote everything down in his notebook without telling me if I was in trouble or not. Kaysen's mom walked over to us and looked right at me. "Did you know he was planning to tell that boy?" she asked, and I couldn't lie to her. "Yes," I said. "He told me today he was going to do it after kickball." Her face got red and angry for a second, but then she just looked tired and defeated, like all the energy drained out of her. "You should have told me," she said quietly. "Maybe I could have stopped this." I didn't know what to say to that. The next morning, Curtis called an emergency meeting for all the after-school staff before the kids arrived. Everyone kept asking how something like this could happen when we're supposed to be supervising the kids. Curtis explained what we knew so far, but said the investigation was ongoing. I showed up for my regular shift that afternoon, even though I wasn't sure if I was allowed to be there. I wore my orange vest like it was armor protecting me from all the stares. Curtis saw me and said I could stay, but we needed to talk later about new protocols. The kids started arriving, and right away, I could hear them whispering about what happened to Kaysen. Some kid said he heard Kaysen got jumped by high schoolers who snuck onto campus. Another said it was a gang thing. The rumors kept getting worse, with each kid adding their own details. One girl said she heard Kaysen was in a coma, which wasn't even close to true. I wanted to tell them all to shut up, but I just kept setting up the sports equipment and trying to act normal, even though nothing felt normal anymore. During snack time, Quincy walked straight up to me with this confused look on his face. "Why does everyone keep saying Kaysen's name when they look at me?" he asked. I didn't even talk to him yesterday. My chest got tight because I realized Quincy had no idea what happened. He kept asking what was going on and why teachers were being weird around him. I told him there was an incident, but it wasn't his fault. Quincy said he was playing kickball the whole time after school and never saw Kaysen anywhere near him. That's when it clicked that someone else must have seen Kaysen walking toward the kickball field. Someone saw him trying to approach Quincy and decided to stop him. Curtis started pulling kids into the office one by one, with the principal sitting there taking notes. I could see them through the window asking questions and writing stuff down. Most kids came out looking confused, but a few looked scared. 3 different kids mentioned seeing Corey Ramsey and his friends hanging around the bathrooms before pickup time. One girl said she heard them laughing about something but didn't know what. Curtis called Corey's group in together, and they all sat there denying everything at first. Corey kept saying he was on the playground the whole time. His friends backed him up, but they kept looking at each other nervously. Then, this smaller kid named Tyler started crying and said he heard Corey say something about teaching the weird kid a lesson. Corey turned red and yelled at Tyler to shut up, but the principal had already heard enough. The principal took Corey to her office while Curtis kept questioning the other boys. They started admitting more details about how Corey followed Kaysen into the bathroom. One kid said Corey was mad because he saw Kaysen staring at Quincy during kickball. Curtis wrote everything down in his report while calling the police station to file an official complaint. The principal called Corey's parents, and I could hear her voice getting louder through the door. She used words like assault and criminal charges and zero tolerance policy. Corey's mom showed up 20 minutes later looking shocked and kept saying her son would never do something like that. The principal showed her the statements from the other kids, and she went quiet. 3 days passed before Kaysen came back to the program. He had a black eye that was turning yellow and green around the edges. There were bandages above his eyebrow and his lip was still swollen. He walked in with his head down and went straight to the office instead of joining the other kids. His mom followed behind, looking exhausted and angry at the same time. During recess, Kaysen stayed inside, sitting at the counselor's desk, drawing in his notebook. I watched through the window as he hunched over the paper, not looking up once. The other kids kept trying to peek through the door, but teachers shooed them away. Nobody knew what to say to him anyway. His mom spent an hour in Curtis's office with the counselor talking about safety plans. I could hear her voice getting higher as she talked about pulling Kaysen out completely. She kept saying this place wasn't safe for her son. Then Kaysen's voice came through the door, begging to stay. He said he didn't want to leave the only place where someone actually cared about him. Curtis promised they would make changes to keep him safe. The counselor started meeting with Kaysen every single day right after snack time. She asked if I could sit in since Kaysen said I was the only person he trusted. We sat in this small room with construction paper on the walls, while Kaysen drew pictures. He drew dragons hiding in caves and knights with broken swords. The counselor asked him questions about feeling safe, but he mostly just kept drawing. Sometimes he'd show me a picture, and I'd tell him it was really good. After a week of meetings, the principal announced that Corey was suspended for 2 weeks pending further investigation. His parents had to sign papers acknowledging the incident. That afternoon, this older kid showed up at the program, yelling about his little brother being blamed for nothing. It was Blake Porter, Corey's older brother from the high school. He kept saying everyone was overreacting and boys fight sometimes. Curtis told him he needed to leave, but Blake kept yelling about how Kaysen probably started it. He said his little brother was treated unfairly just for defending himself. Curtis called security, while Blake stomped around the parking lot, kicking at the gravel. Later that day, when I was walking to my mom's car, Blake appeared out of nowhere. He grabbed my shoulder and spun me around hard. "You're making everything worse," he said. "My brother's in trouble because of you and that little freak." I tried to pull away, but he pushed me against a car. He said I better stop filling Kaysen's head with ideas or there would be problems. Curtis must have been watching because he came running across the parking lot yelling at Blake to get away from me. Blake let go and backed up, but kept staring at me with this nasty look. Curtis got right in Blake's face and told him he was banned from the school property immediately. He said if Blake came near the school or any of the kids again, the police would arrest him. Blake spit on the ground and walked away, but not before pointing at me one more time. Curtis asked if I was okay and wrote down everything that happened for another report. My probation officer showed up the next morning with a clipboard and started asking me questions about finding Kaysen in the bathroom. He wrote down every detail about how fast I found him and called for help. He looked at Curtis's reports about Blake threatening me and nodded while making more notes. After 20 minutes of questions, he told me I actually handled everything right by acting quickly when Kaysen went missing. He said my community service would continue, but now I had to do extra training about recognizing signs of trouble with kids. The training started that same week in this boring conference room at the courthouse. They showed us videos about mandatory reporting and warning signs of bullying that looked like they were made in the 90s. The lady running it kept talking about documenting everything and following proper procedures. I tried to pay attention because I kept thinking about Kaysen bleeding on that bathroom floor. She gave us this thick manual about recognizing when kids are in danger and what we're supposed to do about it. I had to pass a test at the end showing I understood all the rules about reporting abuse and harassment. 2 days later, when I got to the after-school program, Kaysen was back sitting at the art table. His eye was still swollen, and he had a bandage above his eyebrow, but he was drawing in his notebook. Quincy walked over during art time and sat down next to him without saying anything. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a stack of Pokemon cards in plastic sleeves. He slid them across the table to Kaysen and mumbled something about having extras. Kaysen's hands started shaking as he picked up the cards and looked through them. There was a holographic Charizard and some other rare ones I recognized from when I collected them years ago. Quincy got up and walked back to his friends without waiting for Kaysen to say anything. Later, when everyone was at recess, Kaysen showed me the cards with tears running down his face. He kept saying nobody at the school had ever been nice to him like that before. His voice was all choked up as he explained which cards were rare and how Quincy must have known he liked Pokemon. I helped him put each card in a protective sleeve from the art supplies so they wouldn't get bent. He made a special pocket in his notebook to keep them safe and kept checking to make sure they were still there. Curtis called a staff meeting that afternoon to announce new bathroom policies starting immediately. Kids had to sign out on a clipboard whenever they went to the bathroom, and staff would check every 5 minutes. Some parents picking up their kids complained it was too strict and treated the kids like prisoners. Curtis stood firm and said student safety was more important than convenience. He posted the new rules on bright yellow paper by every bathroom door. The sign-out sheets had columns for name and time and staff initials when they checked. A week went by before the police finally interviewed Corey with his parents in the principal's office. I watched them arrive through the window looking confused and angry about being called in. They were in there for over an hour, while the rest of us tried to keep the after-school program running normally. When they came out, Corey's mom was crying, and his dad looked ready to punch something. Curtis told us later that Corey admitted to following Kaysen into the bathroom and pushing him into the wall. He said he punched Kaysen once in the face when he tried to get away. The worst part was when Corey said Blake taught him that boys who like other boys are wrong and deserve to be hurt. His parents looked completely shocked learning what Blake had been teaching their younger son behind their backs. Corey's mom kept crying and apologizing to everyone, saying she had no idea Blake was filling Corey's head with hate. She said Blake was always protective of his little brother, but she never knew it went this far. The next day, a social worker showed up to meet with Corey's family about Blake's influence on the younger kids. She had a thick file that showed Blake had been in trouble before for harassing a kid at the high school. Apparently, he'd been suspended twice for using slurs and threatening students he thought were gay. The social worker said the family needed counseling to deal with Blake's behavior and its impact on Corey. During this whole mess, Kaysen slowly started drawing again, but his pictures were different now. Instead of warriors with swords fighting dragons, they all wore thick armor and carried shields. The counselor told me it was his way of processing not feeling safe anymore. She said the armor represented his need to protect himself from getting hurt again. I sat with him during art time, watching him add more and more armor to each character he drew. Curtis asked me to help organize an anti-bullying workshop for all the 4th graders the following week. We spent hours making posters about being kind and standing up for others when we see something wrong. The kids traced their hands on construction paper and wrote promises inside about not hurting others. We hung the posters all over the cafeteria, where everyone would see them during lunch. Curtis made every kid sign a pledge about reporting bullying and protecting classmates who were different. The workshop felt like a small step, but at least we were doing something to make the school safer. During the workshop presentation the next morning, a girl named Maya raised her hand and said she saw Corey follow Kaysen to the bathroom that day. 2 more kids nodded and admitted they saw it too, but were scared Corey would hurt them next. The counselor stopped the presentation and sat down on the floor with all the kids. She explained how being a bystander meant watching bad things happen without helping. Being an upstander meant telling adults when someone was in danger, even if it felt scary. She made every kid practice saying the words out loud, together. After that workshop, things started changing around the school. Kaysen's mom began showing up at 5:30 every day instead of 6. She'd sit on the bench near the playground watching everything with worried eyes. When I walked past her, she'd grab my arm and thank me for keeping watch over Kaysen. Her hands shook a little when she said it. Curtis told me she called him every morning asking about safety protocols and if Corey would be coming back. 3 days later, the principal called a big assembly for all the parents. She stood at the podium with a serious look and announced the school was making new rules about harassment. Anyone who hurt another kid for any reason would face immediate suspension and possible expulsion. She held up thick packets of paper that parents had to sign. The packets explained that attacking someone for their race, religion, or who they liked was now a zero-tolerance offense. Parents whispered to each other while signing the forms. Some looked angry, but most seemed relieved the school was finally doing something. During PE class that week, I watched Quincy pick teams for kickball. When it got down to the last few kids, Kaysen stood there expecting to be picked last like always. But Quincy pointed at him and said he wanted Kaysen on his team. Kaysen's face turned red as he joined Quincy's side. He didn't play much during the game, but Quincy made sure he got to kick at least once. Other kids started noticing, and the next day 2 more team captains picked Kaysen before the very last spot. It wasn't friendship exactly, but at least Kaysen wasn't standing alone anymore. 2 weeks after the attack, Corey came back to the school. His parents dropped him off personally and walked him all the way to the office. His dad looked mad, and his mom kept wiping her eyes. Curtis explained to me that Corey had strict conditions for returning. He had to check in with the counselor every morning and after lunch. He couldn't go anywhere without adult supervision, especially not near Kaysen. During recess, he had to stay with a teacher instead of playing with other kids. His parents had to pick him up right at 3:30 before the after-school program started. I saw him sitting alone at a special table during lunch, looking miserable. The counselor arranged a meeting between Corey and Kaysen in her office. I waited outside but could hear Corey's voice through the door. He was reading something in this flat voice that sounded like he'd practiced it 100 times. The counselor had helped him write an apology letter about how sorry he was for hurting Kaysen. He said he understood that what he did was wrong, and he'd never do it again. When they came out, Kaysen looked tired, but he nodded at Corey to show he accepted the apology. Corey's face was bright red, and he stared at his shoes the whole time. Neither kid looked happy, but at least they'd gotten through it. A week later, Curtis pulled me aside with this shocked look on his face. He'd just gotten a call from the police station. Blake had been arrested at the high school for threatening another student. Apparently, he'd cornered a sophomore in the locker room and called him the same slurs he'd taught Corey. But this time, the kid recorded it on his phone, and Blake had pushed him into the lockers. The police charged Blake with assault and harassment. When Corey found out about his brother getting arrested, he started crying in the counselor's office. He kept saying he didn't know Blake was actually dangerous. The counselor started a new lunch group for kids who felt different or left out. She put up posters inviting anyone who wanted to make friends in a safe space. On the first day, 5 kids showed up, including Kaysen. There was Maya, who'd spoken up at the workshop, a boy named Sam who stuttered, and 2 other quiet kids I'd seen eating alone. They played board games and talked about movies. Kaysen smiled more during that lunch than I'd seen in weeks. The group met every Tuesday and Thursday, and slowly more kids started joining. During free time one afternoon, I showed Kaysen some basic moves to protect himself. Nothing fancy, just how to break away if someone grabbed him and how to yell for help effectively. Curtis watched from across the playground and gave me a thumbs up. We practiced for 15 minutes each day, working on staying calm and getting to safety. Kaysen took it seriously and practiced the moves over and over. His mom watched from her bench and seemed grateful I was teaching him to be safer. By the end of the month, the art teacher asked Kaysen if she could display some of his drawings in the hallway case. Kaysen's eyes got huge behind his glasses and he nodded, so fast I thought his head might fall off. The next day, 3 of his best dragon pictures were hanging behind the glass where everyone could see them. Kids stopped to look, and several asked Kaysen if he could draw pictures for them. One girl offered to trade her dessert for a drawing of her as a warrior princess. Kaysen spent every free minute sketching pictures for other kids, his notebook filling up with requests. My probation officer showed up the next Tuesday for his monthly check and watched me work the whole shift from 3 to 6. I helped set up snack tables while keeping track of which kids had allergies marked on their sheets. During homework time, I sat with a 3rd grader who couldn't figure out fractions and showed him how to use pizza slices to understand them. When 2 boys started pushing each other over who got the good soccer ball, I stepped between them and made them both do 10 jumping jacks to cool off. The probation officer wrote notes on his clipboard every time I handled something without Curtis having to step in. At kickball, I made sure the teams were fair and put the shy kids with the better players, so nobody felt left out. When this girl scraped her knee falling off the monkey bars, I cleaned it with the first aid kit and put on a bandage while telling her she was tough. The probation officer watched me walk Kaysen to the bathroom with his new buddy, a kid named Sam from the lunch group who also liked drawing. After parents picked up their kids, the probation officer pulled me aside and said I was actually good at this job, way better than most people doing community service. He told Curtis I was protective of all the kids now, not just Kaysen, and that meant something. 3 weeks had passed since Kaysen got attacked in the bathroom, and his face had mostly healed except for a small scar above his eye. His mom came early one afternoon to talk with Curtis while Kaysen played on the swings with Sam. She kept looking over at her son, and then back at Curtis like she was trying to decide something important. Kaysen ran over and grabbed her hand, telling her he wanted to keep coming to the program because he had friends now. His mom's eyes got watery, but she nodded and told Curtis they'd stay if the safety rules stayed in place too. Curtis had already started making changes after what happened to Kaysen. He created this buddy system where kids had to pair up for bathroom breaks and moving between activities. Everyone got assigned a buddy at the start of each day, and you couldn't go anywhere without them. At first, some kids complained it was babyish, but Curtis made it seem normal by calling it the partner system instead. The older kids started treating it like a game, racing their buddies to see who could get to the art room first. Within a week, nobody thought about it anymore. It was just how things worked now. Curtis also installed these bright yellow call buttons in every bathroom that went straight to the office if pressed. During lunch at the school, Kaysen started going to art club in the library instead of sitting alone in the cafeteria. He came to the after-school program one day with this huge smile and showed me pictures he'd drawn with the other art club kids. There was this girl named Maya who drew anime characters just like him and a boy who made comic strips about superheroes. They'd worked together on this big poster of dragons fighting robots that the art teacher hung in the hallway. Kaysen pointed out which parts he drew and which parts his new friends did, his whole face glowing with pride. Quincy came up to me during snack time while Kaysen was in the bathroom with Sam. He looked around to make sure nobody was listening, and then told me he thought Kaysen was really cool. He said the dragon drawings were amazing, and he wished he could draw like that instead of just being good at sports. I asked if he wanted to tell Kaysen that himself, but Quincy got nervous and said, maybe later. He didn't know about Kaysen's crush, and I wasn't about to tell him, but at least he wanted to be friends for real now. The judge called me in for a review hearing about my probation status 2 months after the bathroom incident. My probation officer had submitted his report about how I handled everything, and the judge read through it while I sat there sweating. She looked up over her glasses and said the incident wasn't my fault, and actually showed I was taking the job seriously. My sentence would stand at 60 hours, but she commended me for protecting Kaysen and helping him feel safe again. She said most kids doing community service just showed up and did nothing, but I was making a real difference. Corey's parents enrolled him in counseling after finding out what Blake had been teaching him about kids who were different. His mom came to pick him up every day now, instead of letting him walk home, and she always looked tired. Corey seemed quieter during program time, not mean anymore, but not friendly either. He did his homework and played kickball, but stayed away from Kaysen and his friends. The counselor told Curtis that Corey was working through a lot of confusion about what his brother taught him versus what was actually right. Curtis came to me with this idea about having an art show for the after-school program where kids could display their work. He wanted my help planning it since I was close with Kaysen and the other artistic kids. We spent a week setting it up, getting permission slips signed and buying cheap frames from the dollar store. Kaysen was nervous about showing his art to parents, but excited too. He picked out 5 of his best dragon pictures and helped me hang them on the bulletin boards we'd set up in the gym. The art show happened on a Friday evening, and tons of parents showed up with their kids. They walked around looking at all the drawings and paintings while eating cookies the PTA moms brought. Kaysen stood by his dragon pictures wearing a button-up shirt his mom made him put on, explaining to anyone who asked how he used different pencils for shading. His mom took about 50 pictures of him standing next to his art, and even Quincy's parents came over to say how talented he was. When one dad offered to buy a dragon picture for $20, Kaysen's eyes got huge, and he looked at me like he couldn't believe it was real. After everyone left and we cleaned up the gym, Curtis asked me to stay behind for a minute. He said my 60 hours were almost up, but he'd been talking to the program director about keeping me on. They could offer me a part-time job, 15 hours a week at minimum wage, to keep doing what I'd been doing. He said I'd proven myself as someone who actually protected kids and made them feel safe. I said yes before he even finished talking, because this job had become more than just community service to me. The next week, Kaysen walked up to me during art time, holding a rolled-up piece of paper behind his back. He pushed his glasses up and handed it to me without saying anything at first. I unrolled it and saw this detailed drawing of a warrior wearing an orange vest just like mine, standing between a small kid and these dark shadow monsters. The warrior had a sword made of light and was pushing the shadows back while the kid stood safe behind him. "That's you protecting me," Kaysen said quietly, and I had to look away for a second because my eyes were getting wet. I told him it was amazing and asked if I could keep it, and he nodded so hard his glasses almost fell off. Curtis let me tape it up in the staff room where everyone could see it. Spring turned into summer, and then fall came around again. Kaysen had changed so much over those months that sometimes I barely recognized him as the same scared kid from before. He'd made 3 real friends from the lunch group the counselor started, kids who liked anime and drawing, just like him. They'd sit together at the art table every day, making comics and trading Pokemon cards. His mom told me she hadn't seen him this happy in years. The Pokemon hoodie was still there every single day, but now he walked with his shoulders back instead of hunched over. Quincy had started this project with Kaysen, where they were making a whole comic book about dragon trainers who went on adventures. They worked on it during free time, Quincy coming up with the action scenes while Kaysen drew everything out. They weren't best friends or anything, but they had this respect for each other that worked. Quincy would show Kaysen kickball moves sometimes, and Kaysen would draw pictures of Quincy as different anime characters. The counselor said it was exactly the kind of friendship both kids needed. Corey finished his counseling program right before winter break. His parents came to pick him up every single day now, and I heard they'd moved him to a different bedroom away from Blake's old room. Blake wasn't allowed near him anymore after getting arrested again for beating up some kid at the mall. Corey still wasn't friendly with Kaysen, but he'd learned to just leave him alone completely. Sometimes I'd catch him watching Kaysen's friend group from across the playground, but he never went near them. His mom told Curtis she was just grateful her son was learning better before it was too late. My 60 hours had turned into 200 by then, and Curtis made the part-time job official with actual paperwork and everything. The orange vest didn't feel like punishment anymore, because now it meant something different. Kids would run up to me when they were upset or scared because they knew I'd actually help them. Parents started requesting that their kids be in my group during activities. I was good at spotting the lonely ones, the scared ones, the ones who needed someone to see them. These were kids like I used to be, angry and lost and needing someone to care. Years went by faster than I expected. I finished high school while working at the program and even started community college for early childhood education. Then one day, this fancy envelope showed up at the program addressed to me. Inside was a graduation invitation with Kaysen's senior picture, him smiling huge in a cap and gown. His mom had written a note on the back that said I'd saved her son's life by being there when he needed someone most. She said after that day in the bathroom, I was the reason Kaysen kept going. The invitation is still in my wallet because I look at it sometimes to remember why this work matters. The after-school program got written up in the local paper as this model for keeping kids safe and accepted. Curtis had kept all those strict bathroom policies and buddy systems, but added more stuff too, like peer mentoring and diversity training for staff. Parents would drive from other districts just to enroll their kids, because they'd heard it was a place where different kids could just exist without fear. We had kids with autism, kids who were gay, kids with anxiety, kids from broken homes, all just being kids together. The staff learned to spot problems before they turned into disasters. Looking back now, getting arrested for selling Galaxy gas was the worst and best thing that ever happened to me. That judge probably forgot about me the second she signed my community service papers, but she changed my whole life without knowing it. I found my actual purpose in that bright orange vest, standing between kids and the world's meanness. Some kids need protection from bullies, some need protection from their own families, some just need protection from feeling invisible. I learned to be the person I needed when I was their age. Every kid deserves someone who'll fight their shadows for them. Thanks for sticking with me through all these strange twists and turns today. Definitely made it more interesting sharing the questions together. Like the video, it helps more than you think.